Welcome back to the Source Garage. Sam here, and today we're going over Grit Guards Part 2. So we're going to be going over a couple of different things I got some feedback on from comments and posts I made. So what we're going to be doing is doing a control bucket. So I really should have done this with the first experiment, is taking the same contaminants from all the previous experiments, putting them in here and just showing you how they react with the mitt just being pumped up and down like we did with the Grit Guards before. The second thing we're going to do is look at if you had a taller bucket, like maybe a Home Depot bucket or something, and to mimic that, I'm just going to kind of lightly use the mitt at the top here to see would it actually stir up stuff at the bottom if you have a really tall bucket and you're just dunking the mitt in at the top a little bit. How much benefit are you getting from having a grit guard down there? Is it actually preventing stuff from being stirred up? Thirdly, we're going to talk about I guess what we'll call the grinding capabilities of these different styles with these big fins versus the holes, on actually like pulling out dirt from your mitt. So if you take it to the bottom and actually scrub on it, twist, how do these pull out the dirt differently from your mitt? And then lastly, just pricing. So a couple different things that just extra information to get out there to add on to what I've already done. So first we'll start off with the control bucket here. All right, so here's the control bucket. We're going to take all these contaminants now, same stuff we used last time, dunk them in here. So I'm not going to actually measure these out exactly. You can just watch them as they fall in here. So here's some of the black sand. Got the rice. And then lastly, everyone's favorite thing that gets everywhere on everything, some sequins. All right, so now these are all, well, the dirt and the sand and the sequins are floating at the top here. But basically what I'm going to do is try and pump these down. See if I can get these to go to the bottom. All right, so right now you can see all the stuff that's floating around in there still. So a lot of it's settled on the bottom. You can see a lot of the rice and the black sand on there. Obviously the sequins are still floating everywhere. But what I'm going to do now, so let's just take it and pump at the top a little bit here. So if you're not going all the way to the bottom, I mean, you can still see there's a little bit of motion. So if I take the mitt and let's try and like stir it around here. I mean, so we are kicking up, actually, if I kind of go around in a circle here. Yeah, now we're stirring it into a cyclone, but we are kicking up a little bit. I can see some of the sand particles. Obviously, the sequins are floating, but the rice is not coming up. So we're not creating as much force nearly as if we were going down to the bottom of the bucket. Now, what you're also missing out on here is, so when you do have the grit guards in here, you can go down and scrub on them to really clean out your mitt. So by just dunking in the top here, you may be avoiding stirring up stuff at the bottom, but you're probably not cleaning out your mitt the greatest. And that's actually a whole nother video I'll be doing later, is the effectiveness of cleaning out your mitt with a pressure washer and with just dunking it in a bucket, and the different styles of mitts. So anyway, now let's look at if we were really just had a super tall bucket. If we're up at the top here, we're not moving. I'm really trying to agitate as much as possible here at the top, spilling out water. We're really not moving stuff at the bottom at all, as you can see. I really got to start pumping again to force stuff down. And even then, the heavier stuff isn't going to float up very much. You can see some of the sand is kind of clumping together in balls that are floating more now. So, I mean, I'm not sure what the effective conclusion is here. If you were using a really tall bucket, you're just dunking your mitt in the top. The further away you are, the better. Obviously, the less that force can transfer down and the harder it is for stuff to stir up. But as you can see here, with enough of this motion up here, we are still going to move some things around. So actually, let me throw in the base grit guard here, which if you watch the first video, you saw perform the worst. Because of the mesh nature, it lets stuff flow up really well. So let's see if we see the same kind of motion if I pump at the top here still. So as long as I keep the mitt up high and away from the bottom, it really is not stirring stuff up nearly as much as it is when, if you just see if I go down here, all right, now we've made a big mess. So I guess you will be getting that benefit from having a grit guard in the bottom of a tall bucket, that you're still helping prevent disturbance at the bottom of the bucket. But again, you're not getting that cleaning power. So if I really was trying to clean out my mitt, I'm going to bring it down here, grind it on the bottom. And now when I do that, I'm stirring stuff up as I'm trying to clean out my mitt. So yeah, pros and cons there. But I would definitely recommend getting something that's going to keep the stuff in the bottom to help you in total be able to go scrub out your mitt and actually prevent stuff from coming up at the same time. But anyway, so that's the end of this. And next we'll talk about the scraping ability of these mitts. All right, so now we're going to go through the different grinding capabilities of all these and talk about what they offer from their different designs. So we'll start with the most basic here. So the grit guard, obviously this big perforated mesh, very thin, not any kind of giant fins sticking out, but I don't think that's going to lessen the effectiveness of this. So when you're trying to grind the dirt, the grime out of your mitt, what you're trying to do is find as many points of friction essentially to grab in and kind of scrape across, right? We're trying to scrape the dirt out of all the fibers, but we don't want to rip them, right? We need to apply contact and grind them to pull the stuff out, but we're not trying to have some kind of jagged, sharp edges that's ripping our mitt or towel or whatever we're using across it. So I think this is actually pretty effective in the fact that it has so many edges around the whole thing. So as you're scraping across this, you have all these points of contact that you're essentially applying force to and are grinding the mitt across. So it would be pretty effective, as well as the fact that because there's no, I'll call it a big height to these, it's very short across the whole thing. So you can push the mitt flat against the whole thing. And you can see on the back here, see if I can capture that, the fibers that are sticking through. So you can see how you get that grinding motion to actually pull apart the fibers here and try and get all the dirt out of it. So this is probably pretty effective, although unfortunately, if this is at the bottom of your bucket, as you've seen, that motion around the bottom transfers straight through and causes a lot of stuff to come up. So good at grinding, although not so great at keeping stuff on the bottom. So second here is the Chemical Guys Dirt Trap. And this has all these holes, as you can obviously see. And I'll try and get up close enough on the camera here to show it. There are little ridges around all the holes. So every one of these has a very, very tiny ridge around it that I guess would add some kind of grinding capability to it. So there's a lot of flat surface here, but you do have a lot of edges. So same kind of concept as before, is that if I'm pushing this across here, I want as many points as possible for the fibers to dig in and grind across these holes here. So again, probably pretty effective. Because there's so many of these holes, you're probably creating just as many, if not more, edges as the grit guard to help draw stuff out of it. And from the previous videos we've seen, this does a great job of preventing stuff from actually coming back up from underneath it. So you could come down here, grind across all these holes on here, trying to pull the dirt out, give it some pumps, and you're actually pushing everything under and not bringing anything back up. So also still an effective design. And then lastly, and I guess it's the most unique, is the Detail Guards Dirt Lock. So this, obviously you can see these giant fins. So these do have, I guess is about probably ½ an inch of depth to them. So these big fins that go around here, and then all these fins that run between them are set lower than them. So if you take the mitt and grind on here, see if I can capture how far in this is actually going. So most of these strands are not even going to reach this second, I'll call it this lower tier of fins. They're really only going to be hitting on the top here. So as you spin around, you are going to be grinding across all these edges on here. Still, you're still going to be creating these points of contact that drag along the entirety of the mitt. So I would still see it as being plenty effective to take this and twist around on here. I might be a little more concerned about the center here. So the center, you have a similar design to the grit guard design actually. So actually, I should take that back. If this is the same design here, even these flat spots, you should still be trying to get that contact to get the fibers through. The whole thing though is kind of contoured, if you can see. So there's a cavity in the middle here and then raised around the outside edges. So if you put the mitt on here, you kind of have a more of a depression in the middle. So if you take it and just twist around, you're going to be doing a good job of getting basically I'll draw a circle like this around the mitt, and maybe this middle or these outer edges are going to get left out unless you're really taking your whole hand, spreading out the force and making sure you drive it all down. That would be one advantage I could see of the grit guard or the chemical guys, is that they are completely flat. So if you just put the mitt down, you're going to be in full contact across the whole thing. Whereas with this, you may have a little more issue because of the contour of it to actually get everything down on here and twist at once. Again, I'm not sure that may make a huge difference, but again, just something to note when using this. Make sure you really push down and turning and grinding. There's not going to be as many edges to push on as something like this. All right, so that is the grinding discussion among all three. So if I could summarize real quick, very flat surfaces, lots of edges to grind upon. This one's still not the greatest at pulling stuff up, so I'd be keeping stuff down, it lets stuff up. I'd be cautious of grinding and putting a lot of force down on this in the bottom of a bucket. This would be pretty good. It's very good at keeping stuff down. You can grind on it, not going to come back up. And then the detail guards, dirt lock, I may have some slight concerns that there's not as many edges as these other two, but I don't know if that really is going to make that big of a difference when turning it around on here, and as well as do the contours actually make a whole lot of difference. There's still plenty of edges here to rub across the whole mitt essentially, so I think it would still do a decent job. And I may try and come up with some way to test that in another video. This would be really hard, I think, to test the effective grindingness on some of these different mitts, but maybe in the future. All right, so this video is not going to be an hour long like the last one. I'm going to wrap it up here and just kind of quickly summarize the things we learned today. So did the control bucket, you could see all the stuff get stirred up as the mitt gets down there, so grit guards definitely do help keeping stuff down. If you do keep the mitt up higher, you are going to prevent a lot of that motion from being transferred, but I would still recommend putting one of these in the bottom to help prevent any kind of stirring at all, at least this, if not one of these better ones. If you do have a really tall bucket, you are helping prevent stir stuff up by keeping the movement way up top. But again, as you start thrashing, more water is going to be moving and causing stuff to stir up. So I'd still always have some kind of grit guard in there. Talking about the grinding capabilities, so these two being completely flat, having so many points of contact to push into the mitt, or if you attach the backing, the scrub washboard to the grit guard, this is going to help keep you from getting to the bottom and still apply a lot of points of contact to actually get in and grind out the dirt from the mitt. So I definitely recommend having this because we've seen how ineffective this is at keeping stuff up. So at least have this on here so you can grind up here and not down here. I still would prefer to have one of these two just for the fact that we're keeping stuff from coming back up. The detail guards, dirt lock, again, I kind of talked about, I'd like to do another experiment with trying to figure out some way to define the best at actually grinding stuff out. This is a bit different with the big fins, the indent in the middle, the contour, so I'm not sure if this would be as effective. But still, this was my winner from the previous test, and I don't think I would change my mind based on what we've done here today. And lastly, talking pricing, so this is the most, well, not the most expensive by itself, but tied with this setup here. So this is $20 for the detail guards, dirt lock. The chemical guys, full grit guard setup here is I think $21 right now. You can get just the base here for $10, although like I said, I definitely recommend getting the washing board here. And then the chemical guys dirt trap is $10. So this is double the price of this or just this at the base, but if you remember from the last video when I broke the middle here, trying to pull this out from a usability standpoint, I still much prefer these. Just having one of these in the bucket is plenty. It's $20 versus $10. If you're going to use this on such a critical part of your washing to try and prevent scratching, I would definitely still go with this one. It's not a massive price cost, even though I understand the relative doubleness of this. So that's going to sum it up here. I don't think I'm going to do anything more with grit cards unless I can come up with some way to do a grinding test. If anyone has any ideas, please let me know. I'm very skeptical about some really scientific way to get an accurate measure of how effective these are at grinding. But let me know if you can think of something. That's the end of this. Next, I'm going to be doing a video on the effectiveness of power washers or pressure washers to actually wash out different kinds of mitts. So I got a whole cabinet full of mitts here. I'm going to try out some of those and see how effective these are at releasing the dirt from using a pressure washer. Going to do one with dunking them in buckets or grinding them on some of these and see how effective these are at releasing dirt and what kind of mitts you want to use. So subscribe and stick around and see what else I'm going to be coming out with. Thanks for watching.